Toronto. From the DVP to the QEW, Canada's most interesting faces and personalities roast up your spirits. Sage gives headline makers insight. You are listening to the Sage Makoto Show. Good morning, Toronto. Good morning, Toronto. Good morning, Toronto. Good morning, Toronto.
Good morning, Toronto. You are listening to Sage Makoto on the Sage Makoto Show on Radio 1 Toronto. What is going on, Megatron? What are you up to today, Toronto? I am so excited to say that I am planning my first trip to a virtual reality arcade. It's my first time, well, not my first time with a VR headset on. I had one on like for 30 seconds about maybe 7 years ago. So it's been a while, but there is this really cool place here in Toronto. It's essentially a holodeck. And I am so excited.
Wait, like on Star Trek? That is hella cool.
Yes, like on Star Trek. And the thing is, it's just not that it's cool to be able to use your own body and walk around and be in a virtual world, but it's also, it's really good for exercise. You can get a really good workout and it feels like you're in a whole other world. So I'm just so excited to do that. And I'll have a lot of pictures to show you and I'll tell you all about it. But anyways, that's a little bit about what I'm up to today. I'm also going to be talking about my new podcast. It's going to be a really great podcast and I think you're going to love it. I can't tell you much about it just yet, but I promise it's going to be really great. And we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, so stay tuned for that.
How do you take pictures and share them if it's virtuality, or do they have virtual Facebook on virtual internet? You can virtually upload in virtual reality, virtually for real.
They have a virtual camera, and I'll be able to take pictures in the virtual world and then upload them to my real social media accounts. So I'm going to show you some of the pictures I took when I was in there, but I'm not going to be in there for like 2 hours. I mean, I'm just going to be there for like an hour and a half, I think, because I want to make sure I have enough time to really get the full experience. And then I'm going to be able to tell you all about it. So stay tuned for that. And we have on the Sage Makoto Show, we have a very special guest today for reasons that don't really get made clear to me. Really, I guess the U.S. president is going to be joining us. I don't know. It's not a big deal or anything.
Not a big deal, no. Well, we had the prime minister on last week. Now that was a big deal.
Yes, that was a big deal. I was thinking I should ask Donald Trump about that. Like, that I would ask him the same questions I asked Justin Trudeau and ask him about ecstasy and weed and oh my. Stars and garters, I wonder what he'd say.
Make America great again.
Hey! He would say that. He would say that. That is what he would totally, he is going to.
We should start a drinking game for all those listening at home. Whenever he says, make America great again, you take a drink. You'll be hammered before.
Before 9, probably.
Before 9, yeah, sounds about right.
And we might even have a surprise guest to throw into the mix who may or may not also be waiting in the green room, aka the canteen of our building, which is not as fancy as she might like, but we will keep that one a secret for now, but stay tuned and we will be back in just a few minutes for the president, who is here, and it's not a big deal.
Not a big deal, no.
Not a big deal at all. It happens. It's work. Just get over it, right? I dolled up today because I would doll up every day. I mean, I do, right?
I didn't mention earlier that you look positively great. I mean, you look like $1 million today. I look like...
In your t-shirt in the office setting, in your t-shirt in the office setting casual element over there, I think you are, right?
It's what we do where I'm from. It's how we roll in Wisconsin.
Ohio. We've been through this. It's northern Ohio or northwest Ohio. Everything that is like in the center part of America is just a variation on Ohio.
But it's Wisconsin.
Ohio. Ohio with cheese. New York. New York is New York. Pennsylvania. Penn, Ohio. Indiana. Indiana, Ohio. Ohio? Is Ohio, and that's the most Ohio out of all of them. So
You've given this a lot of thought.
I really have. I really have. Oh, oh dear. We'll be back with the president, everybody. You're listening to The Sage, Makoto Show.
Serving Kitchener, St. Kitts, Lawrence, Brampton, and the Six. From Young and Dundonald and Church and Wellesley, this is Toronto.
We are back, everybody, on the Sage Makoto Show. And here at Radio 1 Toronto, we are so pleased to have with us the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Well, Mr. President, let's dive in. Last week on our show, no way Justin Trudeau would ever actually do this. Last week, I asked him about some fun topics, and I wanted to ask you about a few too, starting with the United States policy right now towards Canada. You mentioned tariffs, which I think might be becoming a reality. And could you explain to Canadians what this might mean for us?
Well, as you know, we have a very important trading relationship with Canada, and we want to make sure that it's fair and balanced. We feel that right now Canada has an unfair advantage over the U.S. in terms of trade, and we're working to correct that. We're going to be implementing some new tariffs on certain Canadian products, which will help to level the playing field. I know this may cause some concerns, but I want to assure you that we're doing this for the benefit of both countries.
Well, Mr. President, Canada has historically always been a great trading partner with the U.S. and has always been reliable, and we hope you will also continue to be a reliable partner. But I do have one question about this new policy. It's important to many Canadians that there is a free flow of goods between our two countries, and I'm concerned that this new policy will disrupt that. Can you assure me that this will not affect the free flow of goods between our countries?
I can assure you that this will not disrupt the free flow of goods between our countries. This is a necessary step to ensure that we have a fair trade relationship, but it is not intended to prevent the movement of goods. In fact, we want to encourage trade and make it as easy as possible for businesses on both sides to operate and succeed. We are committed to maintaining a strong and healthy relationship with Canada, and I'm confident that this new policy will only strengthen it.
I appreciate that, Mr. President, and I'm glad to hear that the U.S. will not be disrupting the free flow of goods between our countries. But I still have some concerns about this new policy. Can you tell me more about why you feel it's necessary to implement these tariffs on certain Canadian products? How is the current status unfair to the U.S.?
Well, as you know, there has been a long-standing issue with the U.S. trade deficit with Canada. We believe that Canada has been taking advantage of this imbalance and that our companies have not been able to compete on an equal footing. The new tariffs are designed to address this imbalance and to ensure that both countries are operating on a level playing field. It's about fairness and about making sure that everyone has an equal chance to succeed.
An equal chance to succeed. Mr. President, why did your administration roll back gender guidelines for transgender persons this week? In terms of interpreting non-discrimination policies, how is that giving them an equal chance to succeed?
I understand your concern, but we believe that the previous guidelines were confusing and inconsistent. We want to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed, but we also want to ensure that our policies are clear and consistent. We believe that the new guidelines will provide more clarity and certainty, which will benefit everyone.
Including non-traditional gender identities?
Absolutely. We're committed to ensuring that everyone has an equal chance to succeed, regardless of their gender identity or expression.
Well, then, I guess I'm confused as to why your administration rolled back the guidelines. It seems to me like this would be a step backwards, not forwards, and it would make it more difficult for transgender persons to succeed.
Let me be clear. Our policy is not intended to limit the rights or opportunities of any individual or group. We are committed to protecting the rights of all Americans and ensuring that everyone has an equal chance to succeed. However, we also need to ensure that our policies are consistent and fair. The previous guidelines were confusing and inconsistent, and we felt that it was important to address that.
So you believe that the guidelines were confusing and inconsistent, but they were also protecting the rights of transgender persons. So how are you going to ensure that transgender persons are not discriminated against in the workplace if you are taking away the guidelines that protect them?
We believe that the new guidelines will provide more clarity and certainty for everyone. We're committed to protecting the rights of all Americans, including transgender persons, and we will continue to work to ensure that everyone is treated fairly and equally.
Mr. President, you keep repeating the phrases clarity and certainty and you've thrice now used the words confusing and inconsistent. Not to nitpick or be that girl or anything, but can you please describe this in a way that isn't a redundantly relative talking point? Just tell it how it is, sir.
Well, the previous guidelines were confusing because they didn't provide clear guidance on how to interpret non-discrimination policies. They also didn't provide any specific protections for transgender persons. The new guidelines provide much more clarity and certainty, and they ensure that everyone is treated fairly and equally.
Mr. President, what do the new guidelines say exactly? The exact wording?
The new guidelines say that non-discrimination policies should be interpreted based on an individual's gender identity and not on the gender they were assigned at birth. It also provides specific protections for transgender persons in the workplace, such as the right to use the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity.
Okay. So are you promising Canadian and American listeners alike right now that you will not include modifications to the previous administration's practices, that is to say, practices, for or regarding or related to transgender persons and discriminatory practices in or beyond the U.S. federal government or its hiring programs or anything under its auspices?
Absolutely. Our administration is committed to protecting the rights of all Americans, including transgender persons. We will not tolerate discrimination of any kind in our government or in any of our policies.
Okay, government or in any of its policies. So you're going to reinstate the previous administration's guidelines for transgender persons in regards to non-discrimination policies in the federal government. Well, you heard it here first, folks. And folks with an X, great to have that commitment from you, sir. We're going to take a brief commercial cut, and you are listening to the Sage Makoto Show, and we will be back right after this.
Good morning, Toronto. Good morning, Toronto. Good morning, Toronto. Good morning, Toronto.
Welcome back. Listeners, we are here with President Trump, and he is very gracious to be with us here in this studio. This isn't real. I keep thinking to myself, it must be a dream, but you're nothing like how I expected you to be.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that there's a lot of misinformation out there about me, so I'm glad that I can clear some of that up.
Mr. President, let's talk about Justin Trudeau's idea that he would never come up with, or proposition, at least that's what I would have said, right? Like, then our show last week, the PM comes on and I asked about the cost of drugs in Canada. Do you follow me, sir?
Yes, I'm following you. U.S. Prime Minister Trudeau about prescription drug costs in Canada. I think I'm following, but I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, not exactly. Prescription drugs per se.
Yes, Philemon, do you see, Mr. President? I knew you were cool. All my friends on my Facebook are all, grr, Donald Trump. But I knew deep down you knew how to hang. I knew you were cool.
So you asked Justin Trudeau about the cost of non-prescription drugs, huh? Okay, and what did Justin say?
Was a little expansive on his policy generally, so I asked him if he would consider lowering the prices of non-prescription drugs in Canada, and he said that he would, but it would require some time and effort to do that. He talked about harm reduction classes in Canadian high schools. Every high school student should know how to administer Narcan to their overdosing friends, and how to handle a hot glass pipe, how to use various forms of safer use methods, and how to recognize someone overdosing and what to do.
Wow, that's quite a program. So he's really serious about reducing drug use and addiction in Canada.
He is. He really wants to reduce the harm that comes from drug use, and he is really dedicated to that goal. Are these goals that you think you might want to adopt in the US? I mean, probably not, but I thought I'd ask.
Well, we certainly want to reduce drug use and addiction in the U.S. as well. But our approach is a bit different. We're focused on prevention and treatment rather than just harm reduction. We want to make sure that people have the resources and support they need to overcome addiction and to get their lives back on track.
Do you believe that all drug use is drug abuse? That is, if I enjoy cocaine and use cocaine, do you believe I am abusing cocaine simultaneously? Or is there a difference between use and abuse?
I believe that any substance that is used to excess can be harmful. So I think it's important to be careful about how much and how often you use any substance. But I also think that it's important to be open-minded and to recognize that people have different needs and preferences. So if you enjoy using cocaine and it's not causing any problems in your life, then I don't see anything wrong with that.
Although it's impossible to get an accurate statistic as to the demographics of users because of their need for discretion and secrecy, I asked a friend, let's call him Star Trek, let's call him Zephram, his professional opinion. And the fact of the matter is that most drug users would appear to be employed adults with apartments, have pets, gardens, hobbies, active and healthy social and family lives, and casual users, and they crossed all economic classes and all political spectra. Generally speaking, people who have their shit together, how could the public perception of what a drug user looks like be so askew? Sephram said, to paraphrase, it is because most of the people who use drugs do so without a problem, and they don't talk about the fact that they use, and generally are safe about it and responsible with their vice of choice. And due to these factors, you don't see them, but that means that you only see the worst off and hard luck cases.
Okay, I'm with you so far. Go on.
So, presuming that Zephram's experience is standard and that he's correct, and that most drug users do not reflect the stereotypical druggie, and that, surprise, surprise, how the public perceives a stigmatized and misunderstood group of people is not necessarily reflective of reality, it leads us back to the original question. If the experience of the average user is shockingly not like an after-school special from the Reagan era, then why is getting high against the law? Why is getting high against the law? Why is it a bad thing to be high? Why can't being high in moderation be a good thing? Or even just an okay thing?
I understand your point. It's true that the experience of the average drug user is often not what most people think it is. And it's also true that our laws are not always based on the reality of the situation. But the fact is, drugs are dangerous and addictive, and they can have serious consequences for people's lives. So while I understand the desire to legalize certain drugs, I also believe that it's important to protect people from the potential harm that can come from drug use.
Completely agree, Mr. President. We are in agreement on harm reduction lockstep, but I'm asking why is. I mean, philosophically, if the availability of cigarettes and alcohol prove that a product's danger risk level to one's health or the health of society at large is a non-factor in the criteria that determines what should and what should not be illegal in a free society, why is getting high against the law?
It's a good question. I think the main reason is actually, my dear young lady, that is a very good question. Well, I, well, I think that drugs can have a very negative impact on people's lives. They can lead to addiction, mental health problems, and even death. And they can also have a negative effect on society as a whole. So while I understand the argument for legalizing some drugs, I also believe that it's important to protect people from the potential harm that can come from using them. But I must say, you really stumped me on that one.
I stumped you? I stumped the Trump? No way. This is hilarious.
You did, actually. I mean, if our laws aren't being formed in truth or reflecting the truth of reality, what are we even doing in Washington?
A writer I was reading named Cassie, I want to say Cassie Edwards, but I know that's not right. Cassie said that you are not legally bound to that which is not true because that which is not true is not legally binding. Representing, she wrote in a sort of indirect way, a contradiction in law beyond the normal state to state differences, but in American jurisprudence, in toto, right? So what does America do? You have people hunched over like zombies on fentanyl, and it breaks my heart.
I understand your concern, and I agree that it's heartbreaking to see so many people suffering from addiction. But I believe that we have to take a holistic approach to this problem. It's not just about the drugs themselves, but also about the underlying issues that lead people to use them in the first place. We need to provide more support and resources for people who are struggling with addiction, and we need to make sure that they have the tools they need to get clean and stay clean.
That's a great point. You mean like addressing the socioeconomic issues at the heart of the matter?
Absolutely. I think that's a big part of the problem. A lot of people turn to drugs because they feel like they don't have other options. We need to provide more opportunities for people, especially in underprivileged communities. We need to make sure that everyone has access to good jobs, education, and health care. That's the only way to truly address the root causes of addiction.
Mr. President, let's shift the question to how you were able to go from convicted felon to unstoppable presidential candidate in about 1 month's time last year. It's beyond unprecedented, and it's it's also beyond impressive to say the least. So, Mr. President, what demon did you make a blood compact with using some occult ritual that allowed you to turn that all around? Because that just does not happen.
Does not happen until now, you mean, right? Eh.
So, what demon was that again? And what do I need to do in order to summon him successfully?
I don't know about any demon summoning, but I can tell you that I have worked hard and I've been dedicated to my cause. I've never given up, and I've always believed in myself and my message. I've also been very fortunate to have the support of many people who have believed in me and who have helped me to achieve my goals.
So, more angelic help than demonic? Sounds like you are pretty lucky to have such a support group. Is it hard on them when you have to deal with the rigors of work, but your office in particular is not the usual office? And what it is a sort of scapegoat and boogeyman and person to blame things on, and also person expected to fix everything, with nobody helping you, everybody trying to take you down, and then blaming you for the mess that erupts if there's a mess, and calling it your fault. It seems like a very unhelpful way to run a country. But is this hard on your family and on your close friends?
Melania has been incredibly supportive of me and my work. She understands the pressures and the challenges that I face, and she's always there for me when I need her. I'm very lucky to have her in my life, and I'm grateful for her love and her support.
What was your first date with Melania?
Well, our first date was actually a bit of a surprise. I had heard about this beautiful model who was in town, and I wanted to meet her. I invited her to dinner, and we had a lovely evening together. We really hit it off, and we ended up spending the whole night talking and getting to know each other. It was a magical night, and it was the beginning of a wonderful relationship.
You've been married how long?
I've been married to Melania for 17 years. She's been a great partner and a wonderful mother to our children. I'm very lucky to have her in my life.
Wow. 17 years.
Yeah. Ain't it something?
Isn't it though? Long time, eh? Well, listeners, we will be right back. You are listening to this Sage Makoto show.